if you get identified with your soul, everything changes. You live in a loving world. My guru said to me, Ram Dass, love everybody. And I said, I can't do that. I was speaking from my ego. Because there were some people that I just couldn't love. And he seemed very love everybody and tell the truth. And there were the Westerners in the temple. I didn't like them. They were terrible. And one of them, I was so mad that I picked up a plate of food and threw it in his face. It's a wonderful thing if you ever. Wow. I really was mad. And Maharaj-ji said, Ram Dass, what's the matter? I don't like that guy. I told you to love everybody. But you told me to tell the truth. And the truth is, I don't love that guy. So he came up to me, nose to nose. Tell the truth and love everybody. About this much space for my ego. He was changing my game, changing who I thought I was. And I've since learned that when I'm the soul, I love everybody. You probably have heard me story. That's a puja table, which souls, beautiful souls, Ramana Maharshi. They're beautiful souls. Ramana, just wonderful. And right in the middle of it is George Bush. I love George Bush soul. I don't love his incarnation. I've gotten caught in his incarnation. But I love his soul. Because Maharaj-ji said, love everybody, and there is George Bush. George Bush, he represents everybody for me. I felt so sorry for that soul, for taking such a lousy incarnation. That compassion and that love for the soul. If you can find your soul, you can look at yourself and love yourself. Because you can't do much in the world when you don't love yourself. My guru, he's up there. My guru, I was a passenger in a car that stopped at his temple. And I didn't believe in gurus. I didn't believe in Hinduism. They've got all kinds of craven images, and I was a Jew. The fellow that I was with went up the hill to see the guru. And all I wanted to do was satisfy my curiosity, because something was up there and I didn't know where. I was a Buddhist, by the way, at that point. And I came to him. I wasn't touching his feet, or I didn't do any of that stuff. I couldn't. I kept my hands in my pockets. I was very, very, very Western. And the night before we had traveled, and I had to go to the bathroom. And I went out under the stars to the outhouse. And the stars were very big. And I thought of my mother. She had died 6 months before. And I said, you're here. And then we went to the temple, and I never told anybody I was thinking about Mother. some of you have told a funny story, because when I was thinking about my mother walking towards the outhouse, I was a Buddha, a Freudian. So walking towards the outhouse, I mean, it's obvious. It's obvious. So that we went to sleep, and then we drove to the temple, and I get curious, and this guru, he's got a blanket around him, and about 20 people around on this grass. And he said, "You were thinking about your mother last night." And, I've studied cognitive psychology. We don't do that. I said, "Yes." And then I looked down at the ground, because he had me come up to right in front of him. And I looked down and I thought of all those things that I have done that he knows. I was thinking one after another. Not that one. Yeah. And when I looked up, and he was about here, I looked into his eyes, and he was unconditionally loving. He was unconditionally loving. In other words, all that stuff, he loved me. He loved me. And I couldn't get away from that man. I couldn't get away from him. I wanted to go to United States, but I couldn't get away. It was like home. Now, it's very, when I told this story for about years after it, I said that the thing that got me was that he knew about my mother. By the way, he really knew about my mother, because he said spleen, and she died from her spleen. And I thought, wow, isn't that a poetic justice, that I'm being awakened by the organ that my mother died from. And after about 10 years or something like that, telling the story that way, and I started to realize that he had really awakened me with the love, with that love, not with the mind reading. The mind reading was just to quiet my mind. And he gave me unconditional love. And have you ever had unconditional love? I hadn't had it. Parents want something. Friends want something. They want you to be steady. They want you to. They all want something. They all want something. And think of who do you know that you don't want something of? That maybe that they want something that you want them to stay alive. That's want something. And he didn't care. He didn't care. He wanted nothing from me. He wanted nothing. And he was loving and wanted nothing. And so that was years ago. And since those years, I have stuck by him.
My middle daughter was going to Tamalpais High School in 1987. Some of you by now have heard of her. Her name is Sanatam.
She sings. Wow.
And she joined the Student Environmental Action Organization. And we decided to have a meeting to talk about working with them. I had been interested in helping to train and do workshops. And I don't remember how it came about, but Ram Dass was at the first meeting. And we began together. And this became an organization of some size. We did workshops almost every weekend for 30 to 50 kids. Went on for a long time. And at one of the early workshops in the first 6 months or year or so, we did one on spirituality. And it was the love in the room. It was a 3-day workshop, maybe 4 days. The love in the room by the last day was so thick, dense, powerful, that it felt like you could pick it up and carry it around. You know, it was palpable. And but as everybody was leaving, one of the girls, who was one of the first members of the organization, started crying hysterically. Everybody's saying goodbye, everybody's going. And then I asked her, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" She said, "I don't deserve this love. I don't deserve to be loved." And she stayed with us that night. A lot of the kids would stay. I fortunately had a place where people could stay. She stayed with us that night, and the next morning I sat down with her and I said, "What do you mean you don't deserve to be loved?" She said, "I don't deserve to be loved." So we talked and we talked and we talked, and it turned out that the year before she was an exchange student, went somewhere to Europe, and had a date rape experience.
A what?
Date rape. She
Date
had a
rape.
date, and she got raped by the person she was with. And the strange workings of our the way we're made is she blamed herself. She felt guilty and ashamed, and I was the first person she ever told about it. And I began to think about the consequences of that. That following summer was our first summer camp. And one of the girls she was 14 years old, was just very clearly, amazingly promiscuous. And I knew from my friends from Camp Winter Rainbow, mutual friends, they told me, when the kids are that promiscuous, when they're that young, there's usually some abuse going on in the family. So I asked this girl to tell me about her childhood, family. And it turned out that she had been sexually abused when she was 3 years old, 5 years old, and 8 years old by friends of her mother and her stepfather. And they told her that it was her fault, that she was wanton and provocative. I remember those words. I'll never forget those words. And we didn't know what to do. Felt needed to do something. So we organized a circle at that camp where all the girls sat inside the circle. There were about 35, 36 of them. And the boys sat out. I'm saying girls and boys because these are high school kids. Boys sat around outside. And we created a space in which the girls would share their worst sexual experiences. Boys were not allowed to talk. At this particular circle, later on, we reversed the circle. And there were 18 of the girls had been sexually abused or raped. 8 of them had never spoken of it before. And it changed the whole course of the workshop because it brought up such intense emotions that camp, that we had to spend quite a bit of time just processing that stuff. It also changed the course of my life. I thought about that and thought about that and thought about that, and I thought about it for years. I began to see around me, in myself and in people around me, how the wounds that we receive in our lives interfere with our capacity to allow ourselves life's abundance. And most particularly, and this is what R.D. was just talking about, they interfere with our capacity to love ourselves. Many of us, most of us in this room, 90% of us, have received messages at some point or another which have gone into our subconscious and are still there, because the subconscious exists only in the present, where, you were a bad boy or a bad girl, or you were stupid, or you were beaten and shouted at, or you had sexual abuse. And the tricky thing now, here we all are on the spiritual path, and we wind up with these shoulds, like I should relate to my soul, I should do my practice every day, I should be a good person, and you make promises. We make promises to ourselves. I'm going to every day. I'm going to meditate for 2 hours, and I'm not going to eat that stuff anymore, and I'm not going to drink that stuff anymore. I'm not going to smoke that stuff anymore. and I'm not going to be mean to so-and-so and so-and-so, and I'm going to do these good things and not do these bad things. And then one of the ways I look at spiritual practice is as an opportunity to experience guilt.
What?
Opportunity to experience guilt. Many opportunities. It's rich with it.
You can just be Jewish or Catholic.
Well, there's guilt and there's shame and there's all that stuff. Our religious backgrounds give us different pieces of it. But I have found, I've been doing this work around the world, it comes in different ways, but it's universal. It is absolutely universal. We're all, in a certain sense, dealing with these wounds. I discovered for myself, I said before that I was an atheist, or had been. I was 6 years old in 1945, and I came to be completely aware of the nature of the Holocaust. I mean, I didn't experience it myself, but I really understood to the core of my being what it was. Part of that came from the media of the times, which was movie tone news. I grew up in the Bronx, but this thing I did happened all around the world, all around the United States anyway. Saturday afternoons, there were no TV, so kids would go to a matinee. And you'd see a short film, some cartoons, and movie tone news. And I don't think anybody ever thought, we're showing the news to kids, maybe we should edit the news. So I saw the concentration camp things. I can close my eyes, I can still see them. The people standing at the gates with the big eyes, and the bodies stacked like cordwood, and the people who are so skinny that they look like the way people looked with AIDS with no medication when they all started dying like that, and still are in parts of the world. All that burned into me. Also, I learned after a while that I lost 75% of my extended family. I became angry with God, and I stayed angry with God. Here I am, I'm in a spiritual practice, I'm in a bhakti, yoga, Sikh, dharma, spiritual practice, loving God, minister, leader of the community, and I don't love God. And I don't love God, I'm angry with God. In fact, I realized just last summer that I thought I knew better than God, because I knew when God was wrong. You shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that. And I dropped a chunk of it in the last year when I became aware of how pervasive it was. I went through praying for many years for guidance in how to help people drop these wounds. My teacher, Yogi Bhajan, used to say, drop the past. And in his last year in life, I said to him, sir, you've been saying drop the past, drop the past, drop the past. And I've been trying to listen to you. And what it feels to me like is I'm going, and I'm showing him, I'm going, my hand's open, I want it to drop. Drop, drop, drop. I'm telling it, drop, drop, drop. It's not dropping, sir. I don't know what to do. So I found the process that manifested me through prayer. I did have the good fortune to grow up in a family where I was brought up with this belief that, if you can do it. If you pray for it or if you work at it. So something came to me. And I actually had someone lead me through the stuff I do, where I'm in transition now. In fact, this is the thing we were having an interesting dialogue about before we came here. I told him I wanted to talk about forgiving God. And he said, that's presumptuous. What do you mean forgiving God? Well, I said I needed to forgive God. He said, well, I need to surrender. And so there are different sides and different ways of looking at the same thing. But one of the things that happens to us is, first of all, the identification between ourselves and God, however God manifests to you. It doesn't matter. To me, there's the infinite. And in my particular practice, there's a line that says, how does it go? Each person is given a vision of the divine according to the light granted to that person. I'll say that one more time. Each person is given a vision of the divine according to the light granted to that person. So to me, Allah, Brahma, Rama, Jesus, Jehovah, aspects of the divine. The one that are given to... The only thing that's bizarre to me is how people in Europe could think that God never showed up in China, or India. They're pagans, or they're heathens, or they're this. But I also have learned to work at forgiving, and loving. Ram Dass calls it surrender, surrender, surrender. I'm sure he'll speak for himself, so I won't try to speak for him. But I just what I have learned is that it is possible to identify the wounded place. And it's possible to go there and talk to the wounded self in such a way that it's not a cognitive process, it's not an intellectual process. It's possible to say, it wasn't your fault. You were innocent. You deserve to be loved. You deserve life's abundance. And when that's done in the right way, in the right place, and by the way, that's a mantra one could repeat over and over and over again. I have most of the time when I say it, and if I'm saying it here like right now, I would say, many of you are saying, oh, well, that's true for everybody else. But the thing I did, that doesn't really deserve forgiveness. So one of the things I often say is look around the room and see who is sitting here who doesn't deserve life's abundance, who doesn't deserve to be loved. So there are two tracks I find to this loving, infinite love, unconditional love. When you're in the elevated space, when you're chanting, when you're meditating, when you're in the company of the Sangha or before your teacher or the Guru or whatever grace is given to you, and you're in your higher self, there's no problem. It's not there. It's gone. No issues. But we go up and down, and we're not always in that space. And I have now begun to see that we all have what I think of as we have an inner abundance meter. An inner abundance meter. I'm not talking about abundance just money. I'm talking about abundance in the joy, the nachas, the rasa. Here, two different cultures. Nachas, rasa. The juice of life. How much of it can we allow ourselves? What I have seen is that we all have, all of us, unconditional, well, I never like to be totally unconditional. Everybody I've ever met has a meter in them that says how much of life's full abundance they can allow themselves. And I now see that part of the work of being on the spiritual path is to change the setting, to shift, so that we could allow ourselves to be happy. And the tricky thing about that, about the wound thing and being happy, is that we get scared. And if we start enjoying much of life's joy and fruit, children doing well, money is good, we're feeling happy, and everything is good, and you go, what am I going to do to pay for this? What's going to happen? Because that's the way we are, because we've been, when these things happen, they make us think that we're not allowed to be happy. We don't deserve to be happy. So sometimes just when everything is excellent, and I have demonstrated this one very well, magnificently myself on a number of occasions. Just when everything is going perfectly wonderfully, one finds out how to make it all go kaboom. And so there are new words I work at. Forgiveness, acceptance, allowing. I work at allowing life's abundance. I work at accepting myself to be, oh, here's a hard one to accept. Accepting myself to be a teacher. Accepting that juice, that I've been given the gift of having that juice flow through me. I've been given the gift of being able to step aside and let the divine manifest. And we were just talking about this too the other day, because, for a long time it was, well, isn't that arrogant to think that you're that? But then the other side is, isn't it an ego trip to deny that you're being a teacher to people when you are, and thinking that you're not, and then not allowing yourself to serve and not allowing the juice to flow? So there's a certain sense in all the really great things that I feel that I do have nothing to do with me. The best thing I can do in my life, and it's an excellent thing I think to do, is to allow the divine energy to flow through me and be grateful. Which, by the way, I am grateful to be here sitting with you guys and this gentleman who I love so much.
I'm reacting to the first part of your remarks, because how does God allow the tsunami? How does God not allow what's going on in Russia, Burma, and God, every place, and China? And I started to think about it, that I always say God is one, and one is the top of the mountain, and then goes down to two. Two is good and evil. Two is light and dark. All those twos. We live in a world of twos. And I don't blame God. I don't blame God because my blaming apparatus is very stunted. Stunted. Like, I know that when I was with my guru, it was like we were in a mountain, and he was looking far, far, and I was only looking. And so why shouldn't I trust him? Why shouldn't I have faith? At that time, I very strongly, I had a faith. No matter bad things or good things, the bad things and good things, I tried to look at